One of the most memorable moments I had when I was a child was when my father let me play games on his work laptop. The very first game that he let me play was Counter-Strike, an online shooter game which was one of the most popular games at the time. My father and his colleagues used to play it all the time whenever they got the chance, having hours of fun. Of course, since I was at a very young age playing Counter-Strike, I didn't understand what I was doing, yet I still enjoyed it for some reason. I don't know what or how, I just did. As I grew older, my parents gifted me game consoles. I was very fortunate to be able to play hundreds of games during my childhood. I had plenty of enjoyable moments back then, especially when I didn't have so many things going on in my life. But, in a way, those many things that are happening in my life led me to value my time much more than I did back then. And in turn, I also considered the enjoyment I'd get out of the games that I chose to play. I'd play games that piqued my interest, whether that be in breathtaking environments, addictive gameplay, jaw-dropping storyline, or catchy music. One or a combination of these is always a factor whenever I play games. As an adult, I've gained a lot of knowledge about the world throughout the years. I've become more aware about stigmas and stereotypes. One of which I'd like to talk about is the negative stigma around video games. Video games, back then, weren't recognized as anything more than a time and money waster. Kids and young adults would go play games to their heart's content, while the others were judging these gamers from afar, labeling them as a bunch of shut-ins and people without a social life. These stereotypes weren't all wrong. I mean, stereotypes are born from bad impressions and observations. But as with all stereotypes, it doesn't apply to literally every single case. People are passionate about a hobby because it's something that they enjoy, and something that they want to see themselves grow in. Take for example playing instruments. When one begins to play their first instrument, they might enjoy it, or might not enjoy it at all. Give that instrument some time and practice, and people generally take a liking for that instrument. As one continues their practice, they might eventually get bored of playing other people's music, and think of making their own. It'll be rough at first, of course, but over time they learn from their mistakes and improve on their skills. Eventually, they'll make something that they're proud of to label as their own song, their own artwork. The same could be said when it comes to video games. Anyone could play games and have a blast while doing so. Eventually, after playing plenty of games, they might get the random thought of making their own. Anyone could become a game developer with passion and perseverance. One could spend the time to learn and understand many different things that go into making games. And once they do, they start to make their own. And after they learn from the experiences of making multiple games, they'll eventually make something that they're proud of to label as their own, their baby, their artwork. Developing a video game is tough work, since it requires a lot of moving parts. The technical aspect, the art and visuals, the gameplay system, the story or lore, the music and sound effects, all these are just some of the main parts that make up a game. Notice some of these are different, quote-unquote, traditional art forms as themselves. Music, which I used in an earlier example, is an art medium that can express many things, like for instance emotions. What makes video games unique is that it combines all these different art forms to make an entirely new medium of art. But hold on, some people still disagree with that. And to that I say, art is always evolving, and new mediums are always created. An objectively similar medium to video games is movies. Movies are composed of many different aspects of art as well, some of those being music, storyline, and a series of photos to simulate motion. Back then, movies didn't exist, and when it was first created, it took a fair bit of time before people really adored it. And well, the same goes for video games. In its infancy, games were just games for people, nothing more. But now, games are considered by many a work of art, a work done by a team of artists who put their specialties on the table to make their artwork. Fans of certain games are fans for certain reasons. This could be because of the gameplay, the story, the music, the art style, the feeling, or a combination of many different reasons. People will really dive into these things, and well, there are dedicated people who do that as their job. These people are the game critics and the game journalists, and they evaluate the game itself, its artistic value. When reviewing a game, the most important part to look at first is arguably the gameplay. This is where the player, or consumer if you will, really interacts with the game itself. This could be considered as the interactive art of the artwork. The gameplay could be a linear path, much like a story, or as open-ended as a sandbox, where you can do just about anything. Of course, being an interactive form of art, it needs to be really enjoyable and fun to play. Now, Not all games actually have a lore or storyline. Some games solely focus on gameplay itself, and let the player enjoy themselves without a single hint of idea what got them there in the first place. But for the games that do have a narrative, it's often in a mutual dependence with the gameplay. The story won't make sense if it doesn't align with the gameplay, and vice versa. Though there are some games that really just disregard the story and have it as an afterthought, sometimes by choice. Music is a big thing that's arguably helped video games get their recognition outside the scope of gamers. It's an element that should play well with the gameplay, suiting to the style and atmosphere when need be. It also helps in aiding the storytelling as well, bringing out the proper emotions the story wants to convey to the player. Sometimes when the music is just so good, it becomes the most memorable part of the game itself. There are some games that really showcase this. Of course, what would a video game be without its visuals? Back in the day, there weren't any computer graphics. Games were only text-based, and it had the player imagine the scenarios put up by the game. Fast forward to today, the visual aspect of games is what initially draws people upon a quick glance. Art style and colors help draw the scene that the story calls for. It also allows for characters to be alive and convey different personalities upon first glance. Art style is also important for the gameplay, which would help convey different signals and signs to the player, allowing them to also understand the world that they're in. And most importantly, the feel of a game. Why do people even play games? To relieve some stress? To be immersed and be transported to a different universe? To be able to understand a fictional character in more than one angle? To have fun with your friends in a digital medium? Surely, we all have our reasons, but for the most part, this is the most essential part of any game. The player needs to feel what the developers want them to feel. Make the player feel like they're the master of the whole world, or make the player struggle and work very hard to reach a certain goal, or to uncover the truth of a very mysterious world. All of these elements and a bunch of others need to all be in harmony in order to make a game. It's the combination of multiple art mediums in order to produce a new medium. Only time will really tell how things will pan out in the future. Maybe 5 years from now, video games will be a widely accepted art medium. Or maybe it will evolve to be something else, something more than just a game. No one really knows for sure. But what I am sure of, and hope that you also understood, is that video games are made of arts. Thank you.